Hello, this is video 4 in the Distance Education for European History lecture series. Today we start with the 1919 Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles is the second of two incredibly important peace conferences that take place in modern European history. Its antithesis is the 1815 Congress of Vienna, managed by Prince Clemens von Metternich. That was a conservative peace designed to create a stable concert of Europe in a pre-French Revolution mold to the extent possible after experiencing something like that, and then to preserve a political stasis. It was a conservative peace, not idealistic, but very practical, with one goal: prevent another revolution, prevent another set of wars like Napoleon's wars that would come out of such a social revolution. So, let's look at the Treaty of Versailles. It is a liberal peace, a Wilsonian peace, a peace dominated by the American progressive president, Democrat Woodrow Wilson, who was a college professor and who looked at the world like a college professor, as a theoretician. In theory, what is the major problem of European history in modern times? Wilson asked himself. Nationalism. That's his answer. This sense that all people with common culture, ethnicity, heritage, have a common destiny more important than any other distinction: religious, social, economic. So, if nationalism is the problem, and you are a rationalist like Woodrow Wilson is, then solve the problem. And the way you solve the problem is with the concept of national self-determination. We are going to take, Wilson says, every discrete nation of people that we can, people with common language, culture, heritage, folkways, and give them their own state. Even if it's a little tiny state, they'll have their own. And therefore, their desire for a nation will be satisfied, and with everyone satisfied, rationally, there'll be no compelling reason to go to war. So, let's do this, Wilson says. There's no way that anyone could draw a map of Europe that wouldn't dissatisfy someone's sense of nationhood. National groups don't necessarily have a clear idea of where they stop and others begin. And most national groups, being composed of human beings with human nature, will tend to have a more aggrandized sense of their own national existence than perhaps their neighbors will. In other words, none of these borders are going to be particularly comfortable to live within, and none of them are really going to satisfy this desire for a national sense of revival and justice. But don't tell Wilson that, because he knows better. So, what we're going to do, the Versailles Conference decides, is we are going to take these multinational, multicultural, multilingual empires and divide them up into nation-states. Austria-Hungary is destroyed. It's eviscerated. It is divided up into, well, let's see, the pre-war Austrian border, Austro-Hungarian border, ran something like this, including Montenegro, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Croatia, Hungary, Transylvania, Galicia, and Slovakia, Czechia, and of course Austria and Italy. So what we're going to do, the treaty powers say, is we're going to divide it. Austria, the German part, is going to be its own country. Wait. How can Austria, which is culturally German in every sense, down to the wearing of lederhosen and the singing of songs at Oktoberfest, how is it that Austria isn't going to be unified with the rest of the Germans inside Germany? Well, you can't reward a defeated power after they lose a war. And you'd be adding to Germany's population and power, presumably, if you included the Austrians. So the policy, the theory of self-determination, runs into a few reality rocks. And on those rocks its founders, the French and British, absolutely reject, well, the French particularly, absolutely reject the idea of including Austria into a broader Germany that would give Germany even more of a population and an industrial edge over France. So Austria becomes its own little country. We'll see how that plays out. The Czechs and Slovaks are going to be combined into a country because otherwise they're too small to function, the Treaty Powers decides. Hungary gets its own country, but it loses territory that it considers its in the Czech and Slovak lands, and it loses Transylvania to the Hungarians. The Austro-Hungarian Empire also is going to lose the Italian territories of the Tyrol and Istria to Italy, and it's going to lose the regions of Croatia, Slovenia, Montenegro, Bosnia and Herzegovina to the Serbs to form the new Kingdom of South Slavs, or Yugoslavia. Poland. The Polish people were, well, we've talked about their medieval past and their past up to partition. But Poland is going to be reestablished after the First War. The question is where? Where Poland starts and other countries stop is very, very unclear. It's a very North European plain sort of problem. So the Poles end up fighting against the new Soviet Union in order to take some territory in the east, including areas that the Lithuanians consider southern Lithuania, that the White Russians consider part of Belarus, and that the Austro-Hungarians or the Czechs may consider parts of Czechoslovakia, and they get parts of Silesia, Posen, and West Prussia to be parts of Poland and allow a corridor that's going to connect Poland to the sea. The city of Danzig is made into an international city in order to give Poland a port on the coast of the Baltic Sea. Poland built its own port of Gdynia just down the road, or just down the coast. The Lithuanians, the Latvians, the Estonians all get their own countries, and the Finns fight for their independence as well. Now the treaty powers at Versailles are comfortable with this because communism exists in the Soviet Union. At the time of the peace conference, communism reared its ugly head in Hungary under a leader named Bela Kun. But, among other things, the European powers and Herbert Hoover's post-war food relief agency refused to do business with the Hungarian communists until the fall of Bela Kun. So, Hungary's communist regime ended. The German Spartacists under Karl Liebknecht and Rosa Luxemburg try to create a national rising. They create a Soviet state in Bavaria in South Germany for a little while, but ultimately that peters out. Germany resists a Soviet communist revolution. Hungary's communist regime is overthrown. And the idea is that these little countries here will form a cordon sanitaire, to use the French, badly pronounced by me, a barrier that's going to prevent the infection of communism from spreading into Europe. The second principle that's going to protect this notion of national self-determination, which produces a series of postage-sized states that do not have the ability to stand on their own, that don't even have rail networks that are integral to their countries because they were built by the Austro-Hungarians, is to develop something new, a concept of an international organization where people can work out their differences peacefully. Versailles will continue in Lecture 5 momentarily.